Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Dennis. I serve as Executive Director for the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to tonight's resident talk. Sitka is located at Cascade Head on the north central Oregon coast and resides on the unceded traditional lands of the indigenous people now represented by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. There is much to learn as just one step that we can take, especially when you are planning to visit Sitka or the coast. We encourage you to visit the Grand Ronde Chuchalu Museum and Cultural Center, which is such a vibrant space. I think many of the residents who are presenting tonight had a chance to go visit just in the last week or so. So it's my pleasure to introduce the first of tonight's residents. Orlando Almanza was born in the eastern province of Las Tunas, Cuba. He has studied at the Professional Academy of Visual Arts in the city of Las Tunas and in Havana at the Institute of Superior Arts, where he studied sculpture, printmaking, classic drawing, installation, and painting. Almanza has exhibited extensively in Havana as well as in the United States and Mexico. His art belongs to private collections in the US, Mexico, Canada, Ghana, and South Africa. Orlando was in residence at Sitka this summer, and we are thrilled to have him rejoin us virtually tonight. Please join me in welcoming Orlando Almanza.
Hi. Hi, I'm Orlando. Thank you for inviting me today. Just like pretty fast, as you said, like from the east side of south of Cuba. And then like a student in Havana, where I used to live. I was the resident this last summer at Sitka, and was actually my first residence in your state, or actually, I think the first resident outside of Cuba in general. So I think for me, it was like really amazing. I feel like very thrilled and honored to be like be part of a Sitka community. I feel like for me, like the best way to describe like Sitka experience when I went there, I remember when I was arriving, is like I always think in the movie Prometheus, was like they arriving to like the alien planet, because everything was so different for me. Like the pine trees were so big, like the wildlife, the deers, like something that I only saw like in a movie, and probably the opposite for you too, because like. So it's like so different, like all the environment, the light, the landscape, the water. It's like really shocking in a good way for me. So I was pretty impressive for me. I feel like for me, like I think it was a really nice opportunity, and I think I have to like share here first. This is like the space where I was staying, which was really pretty and unique, honestly. This is like the backyard, I mean the porch, I don't know what's the right word, and I apologize in upfront if I don't say the correct word. So I have the opportunity here from see like the river from this spot. So I was trying to like, I decided during this time like focusing outdoor painting, which is already was in my mind for a while. So I brought like a easel, I put like make it like into a backpack, and I was trying to like working also like natural light. So I was trying to paint like during the morning, like all day in the afternoon. And actually from here, from this spot, I saw like the first deer. It was pretty cool. And I guess like this was like the first really fast painting that I was able to do with the deer like jumping by the pine trees, and was actually really nice and inspiring for sure. This is another piece that I make. Mostly all of these are panels, because I noticed was realized like when you're hiking is every pound counts. So I tried to keep as light as possible. And then was like another view from the house, and there's like the pine trees on the hill, and yeah, more or less this is like the piece. And then I think this was like another location that I really like from Sitka. Was like I call it the fallen tree. I don't know. Was like 10 minutes hike from Cascade Head. One I really like, because this pine tree was a giant tree, was like perfectly aligned between like 4 other pine trees and was in the middle. So I did like 4 painting on this location. Like honestly feels like a portal because all the birds were here. I think because they were feeding from, I don't know, from the tree or something. It was really unique. And this like here, it's like a couple painting that I did like I did like 2 sessions, one like outdoor plein air over there, Sitka, and then in my next residency or here in the apartment where I live in Portland. And some of this one I finished it in the next residency that I was in Newport. It's like I tried to mix between like the natural life in at Sitka and then like added like some of the culture, the butterfly, and in my second session. Like this one, by example, like it's like a deer in the back, which was like the most thing that I saw. The same, I do like 4 painting in this location, and then I mix it with like the countryside, like me, like the cowboys from where I'm from. Try to keep like it's like the this street was like a portal between these two worlds, and my life was splitting out for the first time between my hometown and this experience for me. This is another one that I saw like the grasshoppers. I saw a Sitka, and then it's like I don't know, like a sugar cane field in background in Cuba. So the same, the tree is like in between, like a portal, like join these two locations for me. This is another location that I was working on, was a boathouse. I don't have all the pieces here, just a couple quick presentation. And then at the same, like I finished this piece on a Newport museum, and that's why all the style, but I was also thinking the Rococo style, but actually it was like the Cuban Rococo. So you can see like the Baroque, I don't know how you can call it. Was like this lady from my neighborhood, and I was imagining like her like on this stretch from the East Coast and Newport. I was going to the mansion at that time when I finished this panel, so I was trying to mix between the kayaks and the boathouse at Sitka, and then like between this character, like more like a rock that I'm working on right now. This was like one of the last piece that I did like at Sitka, and was like a landscape, like with the sunset. And this is like a photo. I did like a lot of like panels and then like sketches in the notebook, which you couldn't see it here, but hopefully you can share or remember with you. And then like this, like the last location, like I saw was like a hike, a really high hike on the mountain, and then you see the water, like all the oceans, and was really pretty. But at the same time, what's about the beautiful, the best location in terms of view was the hardest to paint because I have to carry all the easel all the way up there. And there I realized what I was doing until I wasn't on the top of the hill was really like, well, this was totally worth it for sure. To end my presentation, I would like to say thank you to Sitka team and Sitka Foundation. Everybody's involved to make this program happen. For me, honestly, it was a life-changing residency. Thank you so much. And definitely, I will definitely go back to Sitka again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Orlando, for sharing your work. It's so wonderful to see work that you had in progress and how it's changed and grown since you've been here. And as you unshare your screen, I will introduce our next presenter. AJ Strosahl is a writer and small business owner who lives and works in Oakland, California. Her work has been published or is forthcoming from Ruminate, Craft, Cleaver Magazine, Blue Earth Review, Coal Hill Review, and other outlets. Her short story Dayton was longlisted for the Jacob Ziebler Prize for Short Fiction in 2020, and her essay Dogs I've Read was recently a finalist for the 2021 Vandermeer Nonfiction Prize. Her writing has received support from the Vashon Island Artist Residency and the Bryn Du Art Center with funding from the Ohio Arts Council. AJ holds an MFA from St. Mary's College of California and is working on a collection of short stories and a novel. Please welcome AJ Strosahl to the Sitka Center.
Hi, thank you so much, Allison, for that intro. I'm so happy and grateful to be here today. I am, like Allison said, I live and work in Oakland, California, but I'm originally from the Northwest. And I'm currently working on a novel that incorporates a lot of regional ecology and elements of Salish mythology. It is about a group of ultramarathon runners who become stranded during a freak storm while they're on a 150-mile race through mountains that are actually very close to the Sitka Center itself. So I was so excited to come and be able to work on that project. Here. I had planned to work on it primarily to have it be my primary project while in residence here, but my residency ended up coinciding with an unexpected death in my immediate family. So my creative life since I've been here has been very different than I expected. And I've been working on and writing in extremely different ways than I'm used to. I found myself focusing on writing about loss and connection and history and the ways that people show up for each other in crisis. So in that vein, I was planning on reading an excerpt from the novel, but I've decided to read something different today, which is a short story that I wrote in 2021, which draws heavily from the death of a close friend that happened during the pandemic. I'm going to read for about 5 minutes, and then when I'm done, I will kick it back to our moderator. And thank you very much for having me here. This is called Zoom Funeral. We are shocked when Esther dies on a Monday. We don't think she seems like the type. We remember her 70th birthday a few years ago when she rented a cedar lodge in the hills and threw a dance party. We remember how fast and how far she could walk. We remember how she made short work of almost everything. We realize after a while that dying is no different. We send cards and flowers to her wife, to her kids. We send soft toys to her grandchildren. We call or write. We tell our spouses and friends and children that we have lost someone and that it is hard. We receive the invitation in our email boxes and we RSVP that yes, we will attend, or no, we must sadly decline. We think the memorial is too soon or not soon enough. We can do anything on the internet and will. We are grieving in 164 messy, discrete rooms. We are holding all the funerals in the world at once. We are fighting against our neutral, expectant Zoom meeting expressions. We are keeping our faces grave to make our suffering legible. We are trying not to look at our own reflections. We are cowards with our cameras off. We are names written in a font we can't quite place against a square black backdrop. We are nodding slowly and wearing sweatpants and a nice top. We are recognizing the songs they play and trying not to remember our own associations with them. We are trying to be here, to live in this moment exactly. We are trying not to laugh at the sheer number of elderly white lesbian Buddhists present because we know Esther would have wanted us to at least try. We are receiving private messages from a guy our college roommate fucked 15 years ago and 2 states away, who suddenly appears in the list of participants incongruently and would like to catch up sometime soon. We are calling in from Hawaii, from South Korea, from the Castro, from Oaxaca, from our living room, from the study where the internet is good, from a bedroom closet where we can be away from the kids. We are in a soupy, deadened silence as Esther's godson slowly explains Zoom etiquette to us. We are a blinking grid of muted mics. We are mourners endlessly waiting for our subject to arrive. We are dignified and sorrowful in solidarity with the devastated wife. We are sobbing as the physicist's son reads that Aaron Freeman piece about the deathlessness of energy. We are patient with the meandering stories told by the brother no one has met before. We are undone as the obstetrician daughter wails that she thought they would have more time. We are wondering what the Zoom equivalent of a funeral crier is. We are wondering what it would be like if someone started rending their clothes or beating their breast. We are remembering other funerals where Mary Oliver poems were read. We are thinking that on balance, this one is worse or is better. We are bracing ourselves for the open mic portion of the memorial. We are remembering times this has gone wrong in funerals past. We are worried what people might say, or are gathering our own thoughts, or are trying to decide if there is basis enough for us to speak. We are thinking of how we saw Esther at our Zoom book club the Friday before that Monday she died, and she seemed like she was getting better, maybe. We are thinking about the time she came over last year that we didn't know was the last. We are thinking about all the times before she got sick when we were irritated by her dietary restrictions. We are thinking about the times we let her down. We are thinking about how the last time the cancer came, she beat it back definitively. We are thinking about how she shaved just the sides of her head during chemo and looked so, so cool. We are thinking about how we haven't seen her in over 50 years, or how we exchanged emails with her every week, or how we were there in the room when she died. We are thinking that 7 weeks between diagnosis and death is almost no time at all, or that it is more time than we had with someone else we loved who is now gone. We are speaking now. We are talking about how she came to our house the day our dad died. We are talking about how she was there when our children were born. We are calling her a towering woman. We are telling everyone that we made art with her every Wednesday in our printmaking studio for 18 years. We are telling the story of our daughter's wedding when Esther mended a burst seam in our dress with a sewing kit she kept in her purse, saving the day. We are remembering the time we saw her build a platform frame for our partner's futon with a spare hour and some scavenged 2x4s. We are desperately wanting to recommend a book to her and only her. We are seized with wild and tropic grief. We are telling a story of Esther as a child, trying to catch a greased pig at a rodeo, grinning as it shot through her hands. We are bodiless voices that dissolve into the air. We are missing her still. We are flagging. We are turning off our cameras. We are going to the kitchen to make ourselves a snack. We are typing our remembrance of the entire sum of Esther's life into the chat window. We are reminding her wife to download the chat transcript so she can read it later. We are saying that this was lovely, given the circumstances. We are saying it was nice to see you all here today, kind of. We are remembering our to-do list. We are remembering the work of the day. We are hearing the kids shout in the next room, or reminding ourselves to check the porch for a package, or jumping on our next Zoom call. We are wiping away our tears. We are clicking the rectangular red button. We are leaving the meeting. Okay, that is it for me. Thank you, Sitka, so much for having me here. That story was published in an anthology that came out about 6 months ago, and I'll drop a link in the chat. This has been a difficult time, and being in this spectacular, peaceful, just incredible place has been incredibly healing and also unexpectedly really joyful. So thank you very, very much to everybody who made it possible. And I'm so excited to see everyone else speaking about their work and showing their work today.
Thank you, AJ. What a powerful reading. It just feels like it feels so universal. I think I'd be shocked if I was the only listener who heard many their own experiences from the past few years in what you read. Thank you. It's an honor to have you read it here. Thank you so much. Okay. Robert Dash is an award-winning photographer and educator from Washington State. His work highlights microscopic natural subjects with significant climate and biodiversity stories. His photographs have been published by National Geographic, Time, Lenswork, and BuzzFeed. If you subscribe to National Geographic, you've likely seen his work. Dash's scanning electron micrographs of plants were featured in the February 2022 issue of National Geographic. 2 of his images were included in National Geographic's Best Science Photos of 2021. Please welcome Robert Dash to the Sitka Center.
Thank you so much, Allison, and all the Sitka community. What a phenomenal place to be, and so great to be here. I'm going to hope that the sun coming in the window, which happens once a week here in my experience, isn't going to take away from the screen. If it does, I'll get up and close it. Yes, who knows when you sign up for a residency 6 months ahead of time, what you're really going to be up to at the time. And I'm in the middle of figuring that out. There's so many things coming and going. I would love to share a little bit of background. One of the major projects I'm working on right now is a book, and I've had some really encouraging contact with the publisher. And so that's part of what's really taking my focus now. And I'm going to show a little bit of the background of what that is about. Something that I have loved, the property that Rana McNeil and I own, my artist partner, Rana, and I up in Orcas Island. We live in an area that's just gorgeous meadow and rock and water nearby. And I did a book there about 6 years ago called On an Acre Shy of Eternity. And what I learned from that was tiny things have giant stories. So this is grass seed that's about 1/10 of the width of a pinhead. And it absolutely fascinated me. It's an invasive species, and that's a whole different story. But just the kind of the metaphorical feeling of it being like an animal, and it's being an aggressive, invasive species really intrigued me. I love patterns and textures, and I love the stories that tiny things can tell that are much larger than themselves. This is a floret of a sunflower, and you can see the pollen here, almost like a wave, cresting in a wave here. And sunflowers are fascinating for their resilience to drought, disease, and heat. And I have a traveling exhibition that's related to the book, and it's called Food for Thought. And the whole idea is to look at foods impacted by climate change, and also to consider how growing those foods can actually help reverse climate change using regenerative practices. And so each of these images have a much longer story that go with it. I'm really fascinated by a combination of art and science and environmental commentary. This is a blueberry seed. Somewhere along the way, I got corrupted by montage and surrealism. And I like to think of it as hyper-real, because everything I combine to tell a story or to have kind of breadcrumbs to help people explore the puzzle of texture and pattern. Everything is real. It's just conveniently created in a different way. So this I call the hummingbird feather forest. The background is a micrograph of hummingbird feathers from a wing, and that scales at about 1/2 of the width of a pinhead. So it's kind of mind-blowing what happens on micro scales, and fascinating imagery there. This one I call mushroom cloud, based on the trillions of spores that are rain seeds in a healthy forest with healthy soils. Rain and local moisture can be impacted by those soils. So that's what's happening here. This one is corn, micrograph of a corn tassel in the foreground. And there it's being ringed around by kernels of the crop wild relative. And that's something in my research that I became really fascinated with. Every crop that we eat in modern times has a wild relative, obviously, that was found and developed over centuries and millennia. And so what you're seeing in the foreground is the kernels of the first corn. And I should just go back and say why that's relevant is a lot of the genes from those wild relatives are now being sought after to help improve current crops that are in under threat. This one has a little bit of a recognizable theme here. This is the foreground is the texture of a blueberry seed, and then of course the blueberry in the distance. And there's got to be a little humor and whimsy along with the science and the art. So that's where we went. This one I call the Requiem for Pollinators. If you were to look down here, this is the micrograph of a honeybee wing. Right here, the tip of the black and white is the tip of this uranium moth wing. And then down here is one scale from the Luna moth. And this is done in honor of pollinators and the stresses they're under. This is biochar. Again, this is about the width of a pinhead sample of biochar. If you look really closely, you can see these crystalline structures. Biochar is added to soil and it's considered quote unquote a microbial hotel because it's a great place for water, for microorganisms to live and then help add to the soil and improve the soil. This is from my traveling exhibition. This is in the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery from last summer. I love the storytelling and getting that out in the world and having that be part of a conversation. In this case, their families were really involved. Now this comes straight to Sitka. Now I've jumped to the local scene here. When I was here last February with Rana, we were walking around and I just leaned over and picked up a small piece of bark with a small piece of lichen on it, which is generally the kind of thing I look for a sample to consider making a micrograph of. And this one was about an eyelash length, very, very tiny. And it turns out it's a liverwort. And I took it back to the microscope at San Juan Island, Friday Harbor Labs. And this is what it looks like up close. And again, here's something that's, we might walk on when we're walking out in the parking lot or something. It turns out liverworts are ancient plants, 400 million years ago, were found almost in the same form. And researchers can measure the amount of carbon in a 400 million year old fossilized liverwort and compare that to modern samples and see how the atmospheric carbon has changed, which is pretty mind-blowing. So again, walking out in the parking lot, ending up with a story like that. This is just a in the lab example of where I work. I've been there about 100 times in the last 9 years. Driving down here through the Willamette Valley, I'm working on another project about agroforestry and how important perennial agriculture is for carbon capture and changing agriculture from solely being annuals. And I was just enjoying stopping there briefly. I hope to go back and go to this particular farm because Marvin Bernards was very friendly. He said, come back anytime and you can photograph the hazelnuts and etc. I was sick the first couple of days when I got here, and that was when the weather was dry, and then I felt better, and then it was pouring. So I took matters into my hands and photographed the window all wet. Then I did get out, and this is down at the road end of Savage Road, and I'm just exploring my new home. And everybody will recognize these characters. They're really a treat to witness from a distance. Sitka spruce have so much presence, and I am loving learning about them. Definitely want to spend more time with the light and experimenting with the subtle character that they have. We've got a little bit of sunlight down there. And then the last one is my favorite one from above, looking at the tide coming in. And then just beyond that, that's where more work of mine can be found. I'd love to stay connected with people, and my pleasure to present here today. And thanks for everything, everybody.
Thank you, Robert, for sharing your work. Danielle Vogel is a poet, herbalist, and interdisciplinary artist working at the intersections of queer ecology, somatics, and ceremony. She is the author of The Way a Line Hallucinates Its Own Linearity, Edges and Fray, and Between Grammars. Her creative research practice includes the study of animal architectures, land and sea restoration, plant communication, the science of biophotons, and epigenetic theory. She is a professor at Wesleyan University, but right now Danielle is in residence with us at Sitka. So please make some noise wherever you are and welcome Danielle Vogel to the Sitka Center.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am in residence right now. As you can see from behind me, the Sitka spruce are here with us. I have just been in absolute awe over and over again every day at the generosity of this residency, I am living here with this land and these brilliant humans. I can't believe it every day. Deep generosity of Sitka and the landscape. So what I've done today is I have written a kind of letter that I'm going to share with photos woven in, and then I'll close with a very, very brief reading of a poem that I've been working on that will eventually, hopefully, be a book-length project. So to tincture language with language, the poetics of place. For well over a decade, I've devoted my practice as a poet to infusing English grammars with what I think of as the organic grammars of element, plant and mineral beings, ecosystems, and bioregions. What can human languages learn from the organic, polyphonous intelligence and the innately reparative or regenerative logics of specific water bodies, landscapes, plant beings, fields of light, or currents of air? This question has been my compass while composing 4 hybrid poetry collections, Edges and Fray, which is a book-length work that places language alongside the way birds build bird nests, thinking about the ways that we as humans, as we share language, we're building ephemeral, hopefully sustainable architectures between our thoughts and bodies. And a triptych of poetic texts between grammars, which takes place entirely underneath the water. It's a mythology between a character who is a writer of a book and a character who is the reader of that book, and the writer lives at the bottom of the ocean. The way a line hallucinates its own linearity, and the secret ecosystem in there is the sea edge, which I've taken a photograph of here. This is the Long Island Sound. And finally, A Library of Light, which is a memoir about light, cellular memory, and epigenetic healing, which is forthcoming in 2024. Across these books, I have come to understand that language can act as a modality for healing when shaped by way of writing and encountered by way of reading with ceremony and intention. When we return language to the land, when we invite earth into our bodies, when we remember that language weaves us by way of breath and body with others, with place, I believe that poetry, as a nonlinear and thus possibly more organic form of communication, can open us to wider nets of consciousness, understanding, embodiment, and sustaining symbiotic entanglements of all kinds. The dream being that altering the boundaries of conventional, linear human language grammars might alter the bounds of conventional thinking and behaving, leading to more engaged and nourishing modes of living. How we language attunes the human body on a physiological level, and I believe poetry can enrich the biological field through the vibrational medicine of sound and the careful attention to how we pattern consciousness and attention. Here is this absolutely gaspable view at the top of Cascade Head, the estuary, the Salmon River estuary on the left and the Pacific Ocean on the right. While at Sitka, I've been working on a new manuscript, Sea Margin. Sea Margin is a collection of poems and reparative ceremonial scores developed through ceremonial practice as research that seeks to weave the reader into concordance with endangered coastal habitats. Each poem and accompanying ceremonial score is site responsive, flooding the book with the organic grammars of coastal habitats most in dire need of restoration. Estuarine embayments, coastal and island forests, tributaries, freshwater wetlands, coastal grasslands, intertidal flats and riverine migratory corridors, beaches and dunes, cliffs and bluffs, shellfish reefs, and submerged aquatic vegetation beds are all invited into the synaptic, sonic, and visual patterning of each poem. The ceremonial scores added an experiential dimension to the project, inviting the reader to become participant, intentional, and formed collaborators within their own local ecosystems. Both parts, poems and ceremonial scores, will work in tandem to elicit a visceral intelligence and a rewilding of the senses, opening the reader to an embodied bioregional belonging. At the core of this project is the awareness that the health of all ecosystems relies on the balance among habitats that make up the larger ecosystem. Restoring health can only be accomplished by increasing connectivity between habitat patches, which in turn supports biodiversity and migratory pathways, strengthening the resilience of the system overall. I think of the ways we pattern our attention as its own migratory pathway. This project seeks to reattune the reader's attention and increase connectivity between their internal individual and external entangled habitats, hopefully leading to more holistic modes of living. Across my time at Sitka, in preparation for writing, I've been courting this land and its waters, walking the rainforest and introducing myself to the Sitka spruce, the alders, ferns, lichen. I've been telling them my childhood stories from having been raised in Northeast coast forests and waters. I've been reading them poems and singing quiet offerings of melodies that come to me in their presence. I've been sitting with rocky and mineral-rich tributary sites along the Salmon River estuary and listening to the polyphonous voice of the waters, ochres, and other estuarine beings as they meet, converge, exchange energies, are channeled to and from the Pacific Ocean. Woven into my life as a poet is the quiet and ceremonial work I make with plants, elements, and place in the form of flower and environmental essences. Here's one over here that I made with Bleeding Heart. For those not familiar with essences, very simply, or I'll try to be as simple as possible, essences are a homeopathic remedy where instead of the chemical constituents being stored and administered in medicine form, like you might be familiar with herbal tinctures or herbal powders, instead of that, a plant, mineral, or place's vibrational, unique energetic resonance is alchemically imprinted in water. This charged or imprinted water is preserved in brandy and then stored and diffused into smaller dosage bottles, like the one pictured here. When we come into contact with the resonance of certain plants or places, for example, by ingesting with intention, the vibrational essence works to reattune the water within our own bodies, often catalyzing profound energetic and emotional transformation. This occurs through a syncing of resonance. The water in our bodies shifts frequency to meet vibrational waters of plant, mineral, or place. And over time, this process of entrainment is how healing occurs, allowing us to slowly repattern emotional, cognitive, and spiritual misalignments. So much of my work as a poet happens in embodied ceremonial space off the page, and much of this work doesn't make it visibly into the eventual book. Instead, these unseen ceremonies glow at the core of how the book unfolds ceremonial space for the reader. One of these ceremonies for Sea Margin has been making environmental essences here at Sitka. In collaboration with Place, I've stored essences of Usnea, which is a lichen who grows in abundance here in the forests, a circle of Sitka spruce, and I'm remembering Orlando's portal that he mentioned in the forest. I wonder if it's the same portal. It's a very powerful place. Red ochre pictured here to the right, and estuary right here on the bottom. I've been living with these charged waters, dosing daily, and weaving what I've learned through research, field recording, ceremony, deep listening with Place, with the way my body rises up to meet and is altered by these resonant beings. I like to think of this work, making essences for the books I'm writing, as a way of tincturing language with language, to invite the resonance of Place into the language of Place and allowing that mediation to open a healing conduit between beings that eventually makes its way to the page for others to encounter. Writing in this way is slow, mesmerizing work, and I hope to write a book that heals as bottled essences might heal. There is so much more to say about all of this. I'm just at the beginning of learning to articulate what for me feels quiet and sacred. I'm just at the start of what will probably be many years-long ceremony with coastal habitats of all kinds, but I'd like to close by welcoming you into a brief, very brief, glimpse of what will eventually be Sea Margin. Drift 1. Perfect curtains of algae, almost as one, and the phytoplankton rise, oxygen levels a radiance in the sound center trough, up and out toward the shoals, atmosphere, estuary, confluent tides, this upwelling of organisms, of winds and waters, drifts of nourishing darkness, light, salt, hydrogen, and with this, exchange. Tidal resonance in the sea floor, above the sea floor, now under the tide, watershed and upswell of marsh and beach edge of tidal forests, mangrove, swamps, expansions, to be of moraines and sills, little necks, cherry stones of osprey, porcupine and river otter, whelks, urchin, to be of mudflat fox, of periwinkle, and the winter skate's purse. To work this good darkness into the shallows, this vital brackish water, resuscitation of every coastal stream. To be dwellers with this land, to be of source to sea. And now the dark expands, flowing out to edge, the curve of a bordering current, until it folds, bends, catching light, striates through the flexing, is exchanged, returned, then moves inward once more and disappears. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Danielle, for sharing your work and reading for us. I think it's so, the pandemic has brought so many challenges, and it's also brought some surprising revelations. And one of my favorite personal ones is how it's changed the reading of shape poems. I just love being able to see have both the reading married up with the visual of seeing the words on the page. So thank you so much for sharing a shape poem with us. Okay. Tilke Elkins is an artist, writer, and curator focused on site-specific painting and social practice art. Tilke has worked with mineral and botanical pigments since 2007 and is the founding director of Wild Pigment Project, a collaborative initiative she established in 2019 to promote ecological balance and regenerative economies by sharing her passion for wild pigments, their place of origin, and their cultural histories. Elkins teaches courses on foraging and paint making, including through Portland Community College, the University of Oregon, Wildcraft Studio School, Lewis and Clark College, and the Pacific Northwest College of Art. Her most recent work was exhibited at Form and Concept Gallery in Santa Fe, New Mexico, along with the Wild Pigment Project Group exhibition, which she curated. Please welcome Tilke Elkins to the Sitka Center.
Thank you so much, Allison. I'm immensely moved to be here. Like everyone, all the residents have expressed, this place is just powerful and inspiring beyond words. And I have just huge gratitude to be here. Thank you everyone for sharing. I'm really, really moved and blown away by all that has been shared today. I'm here on the homelands of the Salmon River Band of the Tillamook people, a place also known as Nechesney, and I give my profound thanks to all the people connected to this place. I'm immensely grateful to the Sitka Center and all its supporters for making my time here possible. I'm also very grateful to my partner, Noelle Getty, for caring for dogs and household while I'm away, and to my family, especially my parents and my brother, for celebrating my creative work. And I'm going to read a bit, and then I'm going to do a screen share with some slides and read for that. In coming here, I had a clear desire to engage in a reciprocal relationship with a place through my art practice with pigments. I wanted to spend time being with an interspecies community in an unbroken day-to-day way, a shift from the intensive work of Wild Pigment Project. For many years, my goal as an artist has been to be in an outside place and make work there, bringing very little with me. As a descendant of white English settlers living on stolen land, how to do that in a way that feels ethically resonant, culturally appropriate, and creatively interesting to me is an intricate puzzle. I agree with writer and Red Nation member Justine Teba when they say, no society can ever have an ethical relationship to a place it stole. Just as I believe that an extractive, unlimited growth-oriented fossil fuel-based society can't have an ethical relationship with the planet. For me, wild pigments offer an ethical microcosm through which to begin to navigate these overwhelming truths. I make paint with minerals I find on site, and I've applied them as paint to the surfaces of dead leaves, logs, and tiny sections of cliff faces. But ultimately, the decision to alter these wild surfaces often feels like one best made by a whole community and not an individual. So while here at Sitka, I've been painting instead on refuse generated by humans that's made its way into the landscape. In this case, boards and plywood worn smooth by wave action. Reclaiming these discarded objects as painting surfaces, I am able to paint on the place, with the place. Painting is an activity that draws me closer to the land and allows me to be observed, to exchange thought forms, to listen and be listened to. The painting is both a communication intended for other humans and evidence of participation in a moment of interspecies coexistence. The subtle tuning in, relaxing, and spending time moving, doing, and receiving, but not thinking, that foraging requires is, for me, what's needed to be with, to be in relationship with. Painting is the excuse, really. It's the gift I get for being present. It's permission for me to try to touch the inner aching I feel towards beauty. My imagery right now, incidentally, comes from the abstract colorist maximalists from the early 20th century, like the work of French artist Sonia Delany, whose work was informed by Ukrainian folk quilts and who inspired Paul Klee's famous color block paintings, though that fact is little known. Being able to uncover this maximalist palette that's living in the subtle colored rocks all around me is a huge gift. One of the ways I give back to the land is a practice of generating rent money for indigenous traditional custodians in the places where I forage. Part of my practice as an artist this year has been to offer the reclaimed wood that I paint on for sale, while offering the pigments that make up the paintings for rent only. At an agreed upon time, I wash the pigments off the wood they're painted on and return them to the land where I gathered them. While here at Sitka, I visited the Chachalu Museum at Grand Ronde and talked with historian David Harrelson, who suggested that I direct the rent money from paintings I make while here at Sitka to be used for a supplemental stipend to the Indigenous Placekeeping Artist Fellows, who are Native artists of Western Oregon who stay at Sitka in residence. Sitka is enthusiastic about the idea, so that's what I'll do. I'm framing this work as ceremonies for being with, which is really resonant with Danielle's work. Showing up with just a paintbrush in a place and slowly discovering a broad mineral palette, rocks to use as mortar and pestle and muller, and finding the right size shells to carry water and hold paint. All these things have felt like ceremonies of being with for me. And I come close, and the beings I come close to while I'm here. In the chapter of braiding sweetgrass called Burning Cascade Head, written while my hero, Robin Wall Kimmerer, was here in residence at Sitka, she says about ceremony, ceremonies transcend the boundaries of the individual and resonate beyond the human realm. These acts of reverence are powerfully pragmatic. These are ceremonies that magnify life. Writing of the lack of ceremonies connected to land in colonist society, she says, ceremonies for the land no doubt existed in the old country, but it seems they did not survive emigration in any substantial way. I think there is wisdom in regenerating them here as a means to form bonds with the land. If you are interested in this work, which will appear through my website, then please do get in touch with me and I will put my information in the chat. So here now is the quietest beginning of a ceremony between me and the land. Ceremonies for being with. Your eye seeks other eyes. The eyes of the birds are often too small or too fast to see. The eyes of seals merge with the shining domes of their heads. The eyes of otters are avoidant. The eyes of elk are deep and watchful, but it's impolite to stare. Your eyes seek out the eyes of the land. Without trying, your eyes scan the ground at your feet for other eyes, rocks with improbable round shapes at their centers, worn driftwood with perfect circular holes where the knots have fallen out, circular puddles in the tops of boulders. Gather the eyes that can ride in your palm, walk a few paces, feel their weight, examine their circles, their layers of geologic mystery. Arrange them on a log or on the other logs facing you, or on other rocks facing you. Let them take you in. Feel the seals, the otter, the chirping eagle, the diving duck, the seagull, the fox sparrow, the golden wren watching you. Feel the eyes of the sun and the moon watching you. Ceremony for being with color. See the thin band red earth in the cliff that rises over the rocky beach. See the red rocks, the ones that looked at first like brick shards worn by the waves, scattered occasionally between all the gray and brown rocks on the beach. Pick one up and smooth it with your fingers. Feel its greasiness, like dense lipstick. Lick your finger and make small circles on its surface. See the deep red appear on your finger pad. Feel the strangeness, feel the specialness. Feel your heart speed up. For the next 2 weeks, pick up rocks, hold them, walk with them, put them down. Place them on logs according to color and texture. Hide them under logs when you leave. Sometimes don't. Carry some up the hill for you and carry some up the hill with you and crush them in a stone mortar and pestle. Back on the beach, crush them on flat rocks and mull them with smaller flat rocks. Carry water to those rocks in a large broken clamshell from a stream down the beach. Spill half the water. Find flat rocks within arm's reach of the stream instead and sit there, using the broken clamshell to scoop water onto the mulling stones. See the unusual round white stones below the high tide line. Cover one with red ochre paint. Feel suddenly exposed. Feel dread. In the morning, check to see that the tide has taken the red paint away. See that the tide has taken the red paint away. It has. Decide not to paint the white rocks again. Find a large weathered piece of plywood with a frayed yellow rope tied through a hole in the top. Decide to paint this instead. Make tiny piles of each of the colored rocks you've crushed on a large flat stone, all the colors, as many as you have, the dark red ochre and the paler pink ochre, the deep bright yellow-orange ochre that came from that one rock, the slightly paler yellow bright ochre that came from several rocks, the 3 blues, the one that came from the puzzle rock that collapsed into hard blue shards when you lifted it, the one that came from the pale blue vein in the sand that was edged with thin sulfurous yellow, the slightly greenish one that was encased in beige ochre like an egg, the dark olive green one that looks brown whenever it doesn't look green, the pale yellow that crumbles audibly from a cliff next to the place where you paint, making sounds like someone small creeping up behind you, the black charcoal from a massive burned stump that was reluctant to give up its charred scales, making you promise to use every speck you broke from it. Just as you scoop all these out onto the flat rock, listen to the quiet inner voice that says, not yet, that says, wait, stop and wait. When the hard rains start not long after, feel grateful. Instead of leaving the beach, go the other way. Find an improbable cave under a boulder, nearly overtaken by surf, deep and high enough to stand in. Feel the humanness of this place. See where the edge of the boulder has turned from yellow to red, as if calcined by a fire. See the small notches in the ascending line of the side of the rock face, like a ladder. See the bowl-like depressions in a large rock by your foot. Feel the subtleness of stone architecture. Watch the heavy rain blowing in waves on the surface of the ocean. Feel dry and cold. Just a couple more paragraphs. Hear the voice that says, now. Find a thin, flat rock like a plate or a tray and squat down. Use the flattened end of a stick to scoop the dry color powders onto the stone tray in an array of beauty. Use smaller rocks for levels. Drink in the colors with your eyes, their abundance, their miracle. Feel the stone walls drinking them in. Feel a thirst there. Know you will leave them. Know that to leave them in plain sight would interrupt an unspoken agreement. Know what the right thing is. Step to the edge of the overhang and place the tray just beyond it on the ground in the rain. Watch as the drops land on the piles of dust, sending up soft puffs of color. Watch as the colors turn dark and run into each other. Watch as they run off the tray. Walk back along the beach in the almost dark. There's a yellow you've never seen before, a big piece, smooth and dense. Put it in your pocket. Walk, wait, there's a green one, the one you found only once before. Is that it, really? It's almost too dark to see. Yes, that's it. Put it in your pocket. Before you can take another step, there's another one, a blue this time, perfectly soft, and here, a new dark purple. Here, a soft white. Your pockets are heavy and you're laughing. There's all the color you could ever want to give back to this place.
Thank you, Tilke, for sharing your work with us and leading us in ceremony this evening. We have one more presentation and presenter to introduce you to. Rick Williams is a fisheries ecologist and research associate in the Department of Biology at the College of Idaho. His research and consulting focus on conservation of native steelhead, redband, and cutthroat trout in Western North America. Rick has been active in Columbia River salmon recovery issues since 1987, and in 2006, he published a book on Pacific salmon recovery, Return to the River, that describes the century-long decline of Columbia River salmon and steelhead and proposes a new approach to their restoration. He is actively working on a new collaborative book project on the general failure of salmon management. Please welcome Rick Williams to the Sitka Center.
It's a pleasure to be here at Sitka. It's astonishing to hear the diversity in the other residence programs, and just all of us are really enjoying experiencing the beauty and the solitude of the Sitka Center itself and the staff, as well as the incredible landscape here. I'll jump right into some slides, and then we'll finish with a little bit of a reading. Okay, so here's just a few shots of the Sitka while we've been here, and pretty well represent. The upper right shows the estuary, a fabulous sunset the other day. I'm staying in the Morley House, which appears to be like the presidential palace here. It's a large room, plenty of space, and then just incredible walks, the elk that we see in the meadow below us, and then the incredible temperate rainforest of the Sitka spruce, so forth. Everyone, this is my studio, my tools, my computer. This is the lookout. This is where I'm spending 90% of my time, sitting in the chair working on the book, interrupted by occasional guitar breaks and walks outside. What I'm here working on a book that we've tentatively called Managed Extinction with my longtime collaborator, Jim Ligatowicz. Jim and I have been working together for 30 some years. And the book really focuses again on the long-term decline of salmon and steelhead in the Northwest in the Columbia River, our societally lack of ability to be able to turn that. And we believe strongly that it's because we have a wrong conceptual foundation for managing salmon over the long term. And we think that the correct one is a place-based ecological foundation. And place-based is a really important concept. And while I've been here at Sitka on walks, nothing to me captures place-based than the Sitka spruces that are here on the property and the forests around it. You walk back and you see this incredible old tree with lichens all over it. Looks primeval, and it just looks totally like it belongs there, in the same way that salmon belong there, and the elk we see in the meadow belong here. And so we'd like to try to use lead people through this book and the writings into a new vision for salmon management that blends Western science and the TEK, or traditional ecological knowledge, and local ecological knowledge that Robin Wall Kimmerer articulates as well as anyone. And then we argue that the lessons are there for us to learn from the salmon and from the rivers and estuaries themselves, if we slow down and pay attention and listen well enough. And so that's kind of where we're going in the book. Let me get back here. Okay, it doesn't seem to want to progress. I'm not sure. There we are. Okay, so Jim and I have been working together quite a long time. This is a book he put out in 1999 on the history. This is the book that was mentioned in the intro that we did in 2006. And then here's one that we did just recently. It's kind of an extended abstract of the book that we're presently working on. I'm going to walk you really quick through some slides about the Columbia River salmon problem, because it's big, it's complex, it's taken 150 years to create. We're not going to turn it around quickly. But this is a graph showing Chinook salmon abundance in river systems historically, from the Puget Sound all the way down to the Central Valley. That's essentially the Sacramento. And you can see while all of the systems produced a lot of Chinook, none of them came close to the production that the Columbia River system produced. The red, of course, is the current run sizes. Here is, in fact, the whole Columbia Basin that's in the US. It's mostly in Oregon, Washington, a little bit in Montana. And the light gray that my arrow is around here is the basin itself. It includes this darker gray, which is the Snake River Basin in Idaho. And so you can see that the Snake River Basin constitutes a pretty large geographic portion of the Columbia River Basin. And historically, it contributed only about 20% of the water flow that came into the system. But historically, it produced 55% of all the summer steelhead, 45% of the summer Chinook, and about 40% of all the spring Chinook that came out of that. Those are the fish that are populations that are collapsing the most right now. That all the discussion you might be hearing about the lower Snake River dams, which are these 4 dams right here in a lower portion of the Snake River in Washington, occur in a canyon section of the river that those fish have to pass through up and down, in addition to the 4 big main hydro dams on the Columbia. So historically, we think that 10 to 16 million salmon and steelhead came back to the Columbia Basin every year. Now we have about 1.8 million. And of that 1.8 million, about 80% are hatchery origin. So what that really boils down to, out of 10 to 16 million wild fish coming back historically, we now have annual runs of about 300 to 400,000 wild fish annually. Pretty steep decline. Here's another example. Pull this over here. This is a busy slide, but all I really want you to see, this is Snake River salmon and steelhead populations from 1957, which just happens to be when the start of our really good data is. And you can see all these black squares are the dams that went in. So you can see 7 of the 8 dams that the fish have to transect went in between 1957 and 75. And it's pretty clear trend down with a collapse of all the salmon populations coincident with the dams going in. Then we had a few years where everything lined up. Everybody thought things were working great, and they're back down here. If we extend this out to 2022, it's down in here. So it's pretty grim. This is the uppermost of the 4 Snake River dams. It's Lower Granite Dam. As you say, they're in the Lower Snake River Canyon section. All 4 dams are what we call run-of-the-river dams. They're only about 100 feet high. They don't allow, because of that, they don't really allow much flood control. They also, the 4 dams combined produce about 3% of all the electricity that comes out of the entire Columbia Basin grid. So a very small amount. What they're there primarily for is this lock system here in the middle, which allows small barges to travel up to Lewiston, Idaho, and transport grain and wood products down to Portland or down to the Tri-Cities area where they could be trucked or barged on bigger barges. So the Snake River Dam issue kind of focuses around these 4 lower run-of-the-river dams. One thing we discovered in the last decade is that the crisis we're having with the orcas, the southern resident killer whale population that lives essentially from the lower Vancouver Island down through Puget Sound and off the Oregon-Washington coast. All of us watched the tragic news videos the last year or two with the female from the J pod that was pushing her dead calf around for weeks. It was heartbreaking. That's this population, and this population relies very, very heavily on the Chinook that came out of the Snake River Basin, particularly on the summer and spring Chinook. And this is a graph from one of the chapters in our book. These are Chinook salmon from the Fraser River, the next river north. There's 4 different races of Chinook that come down the coast in sequence from April through October, spring, summer, early summer, and fall. This black line is what they looked like back in the 80s. The red line is what they look like now. And so you can see that the spring Chinook numbers have collapsed. The early summer Chinook numbers have collapsed. So that's the void of about 3 months right now. And the killer whales are primarily feeding on Chinook. That's what they're looking for. That's what they evolved with. These are the big Chinook that have lots of oil and lots of caloric capacity. And so the orcas are starving to death in that 2-month period. And that's when the calving occurred. That's when this incident occurred. So how's the whole region responded to these declines in salmon? Well, we built hatcheries. We've got 15 agencies that fund them. We grow Chinook, steelhead, coho, and sockeye salmon in them. We release 140 million hatchery fish for out of 130 facilities per year. And they're not coming back right now. So here's another picture of the whole Columbia River system. And the snake is in red here, the 8 dams. We have a metric that we pay attention to that tells us how the fish populations are doing. It's called an SAR, which stands for smolt to adult return. It's simple math. It says basically out of a pair of spawning salmon, if 100 of their juveniles go out as smolts, how many come back? That's the smolt to adult ratio. And the bottom line is they have to get 2 back just to maintain their population for the male and female that created it. And right now you can see this is, this is steelhead. The rivers in green here, all of the SARs are 4 to 5%. Then we hit the Snake River. There's no rivers that break off in these 4 dams here. So everything has to get above the 8th one, then into the salmon or Clearwater system. 8 dams, we're getting an SAR for steelhead of 1.3. So they're not even maintaining themselves. And Chinook are even worse. Their SARs for the last 15, 20 years have been 0.9. So they're on a very clear trajectory toward extinction. Here's a dam that here's I'll just click a little more. There's the summer steel, the Chinook one. The SARs, we don't have a lot of data points because I said there's no rivers in here where we can collect data on them. They have little electronic tags in them so we can catch them at lower granite. That's the decline. That's where here's the replacement. If we look at steelhead, they're a little better, but not much. So if we ask what would happen if we took the 4 lower snake dams out, well, this would be the end of the SAR, the dam induced mortality. We don't know what they're going to do, but this is a possibility. For steelhead, it would take their SIRs up into the rebuilding zone. The 4 to 6% are some of the governmental recovery goals, would bring Chinook up above replacement, but they're still having a tough time. So if we don't do that, then they're clearly on a track toward extinction. And we talk a lot about that in the book. We have some models, we describe that. I want to shift now and show you 3 pictures from the Elwha River, and then I'm going to finish with a really short reading from a chapter that I wrote in the book on the Elwha. The Elwha is a river up in the north side of the Olympic Peninsula. Historically, it was the largest salmon producer river system in the North Olympic Peninsula. This is a picture of adult Chinook returning up the Elwha, but they're blocked by Elwha Dam. It's another dam above it called Glines Dam. The 2 dams were taken out 10 years ago. It was a huge thing. This is what the reservoir used to go wall to wall here. This is above Glines Dam. And now that it's out, you can see the river is braiding. It's moved all kinds of material. It's creating habitat complexity, which the fish really respond to. It's fantastic to see. And then here's what the habitat in the upper part of the Elwha, which has been protected in a national park for 100 years. There's been no logging. This is what the habitat in the upper part is going to. Steelhead numbers have gone from about 100 in that decade to about 1,200 now in that decade. Chinook numbers aren't bouncing up that much, but it's a phenomenal example of what can happen to both a fishery and to a river system and estuary when we give it a chance to restore itself. So I'm going to read just real briefly from the end of the Elwha chapter. It's the final section. It's called a resilience approach to salmon restoration. The response to the 2014 dam removals by the Elwha River, its ecosystem, and the depressed salmon and steelhead populations there has been rapid, dramatic, and encouraging across many fronts. It will likely take decades more to see the system reach a new equilibrium and to understand the lessons this grand experiment has delivered. The rapidly changing riverscape, the return of Chinook and coho salmon, summer steelhead in particular, and bull trout to expanded anadromous life histories, as well as early evidence that the marine nutrients imported by these returning salmon and trout are entering into the ecosystem soils, plants, and animals in the Elwha watershed are harbingers of greater things to come. These results, more rapid than expected in several instances, are consistent with the rapid positive changes in rivers and fish populations experienced in many other dam removal projects. Continued investment in the place-based habitat resilience managed approach as presently occurring for the Elwha should lead to increased abundance of quality and diverse habitats, increased abundance of salmon and steelhead, and increased life history diversity within the populations. In turn, the increased diversity leads to increased resiliency, further ensuring persistence of Elwha salmon and steelhead into the future. Should the Elwha River fishery remain on its present restoration trajectory, it will be a shining example of the ecosystem level benefits provided by the habitat resilience approach to managing salmon. And so I would finish by saying that's kind of the science bottom line, but it's clear also that the science, those steeply downward trends I shared with you that are compelling to me and troubling to other fishery science, are not changing the political landscape or seeming to call our leaders to political action. So what I'm struggling with right now is the last chapter of the book, where we're trying to weave together a new vision and a new paradigm for salmon management that takes the knowledge from Western science, takes traditional and local ecological knowledge, and also brings in knowledge that these restoration experiments that the salmon and rivers have shown us how restorative they can be, and tell a story in the way that Robin Wall Kimmerer is so good at doing, that compels people to start to finally act to save these fish before we lose them. So, and that's why I'm here, and Sitka is really helping. So thank you.
Thank you, Rick. There's a comment that came in the Q&A from Maria, who shares, I started to learn about fishing while at Sitka last fall, and this is riveting information, Rick. Everything is so interconnected. So thank you, everyone who attended the State of the Sitka address tonight. It really was an evocative and just a really diverse group of voices. I just love finding the themes and threads that my eye picks up on that connect your work. So thank you to Orlando, AJ, Robert, Danielle, Tilke, and Rick for sharing your work. Thanks to the Sitka team, and we wish all of you a wonderful evening. Thanks everyone for tuning in.